So this is the Reframe Society podcast. We're trying this for the first time, which is we're gonna just hit record, go live. So instead of just having a discussion and then cutting it up and posting it in the podcast, we're going live in all the socials, YouTube, Facebook, and hopefully LinkedIn, says it's still connecting. I should be able to watch or listen live. We're still going to do the audio only format and post it into our RSS feed because this is supposed to be an audio only format. So hey Carlos, how are you, man?
Hello, hello.
So let's do a quick recap of the Reframaverse, which is all the things that Carlos and I are doing under the Reframe brand. So we have our monthly audio only podcast that we post on the traditional RSS feed for people that want to listen only. We have a different set of content, which is our monthly free webinar that it gets done via Zoom, and it's towards the end of the month, and then it gets posted in my YouTube channel. We have hundreds of people attend those live via Zoom, and those are with PowerPoint. So those we have written concepts in combination with the things that we're teaching. Those are mostly like a class that are a conversation. This is going to feel more like a conversation that we're sort of freestyling on the fly. And then we have our in-person live events, which we're going to group it into two. One is going to be the one-day workshop that we're doing in 3 major cities, in Chicago, New York, and Los Angeles. We'll put links in the description in the show notes if you want to go to that. So LA is May 6th, Chicago is May 13, and New York is June 6th. So we have them enough apart so we can travel and make it to all these events. We're extremely excited about it, and it's the
June
only
9th.
time.
New
What
York
did I
is
say?
June. You said June 6th, just a quick correction
Oh,
there.
sorry. 6 is the number for June. Yeah, so it's June 9th. Sorry about that. June 9th. Monday, June 9th. So we're very excited because this is the only time that we leave Miami to do physical Reframe branded events. So if you're close to those cities or can make it to those cities, we hope to see you. That one-day workshop is going to be transformative. We've taught this to many firms already, and many people have walked out going, wow, this was perfect. And then we have our big event, our live event, that's going to have 125 to 150 people in Coral Gables in Miami, Florida, which will be in November, called Reframe 2025, Pricing with Confidence. And essentially all of 2025, the main theme of everything we're talking about falls at the end to the concept of pricing with confidence. Accounting professionals, increase your prices or change your pricing model. So when you give a number, you don't hesitate and you get what you're worth, what your work is worth. And it's always a fraction of the value that you create for your customers. That's essentially what we're doing, because the end game is to rebrand the profession, because we know a huge rebrand is coming. And either us, the accounting professionals, take the driver's seat on that rebrand, like we make that rebrand our own, and we figure out how to rebrand our profession, or the narrative that AI and software companies taking over the tasks that we used to do and make a living off, and outsourcing, and tech companies stealing all of our talent, that narrative is going to take over. And you're already seeing people talking about accounting and bookkeeping as the first profession that's literally going to go or disappear or be replaced by AI. So what Carlos and I are trying to do is we're trying to salvage the incredible things that this profession has. Is that Carlos and I believe, because we met so many accounting professionals, this is one of the most noble professions, where the professional, almost to their detriment, worries about their client more than they do. And the work that we do, I think, is crucial to the economy, crucial to the well-being of a lot of business owners, and I think accounting professionals are kind of theirs. Let's move on to Carlos, kind of walk us through the format of the podcast so people know exactly what we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, so we do 3 things here. First, we recap what we cover inside of the Reframe Society, which is our online membership community, or we will do it in the form of a paid webinar, but we'll do like a little recap and sort of what the responses were from everyone who attended live and what value they got out of it, but also just some insights we got just from the conversation. But one thing that I also want to add as additional context is that we have sort of an operating model in which a reframe practitioner in the world of accounting, how you operate and how you behave, and these are some thinking principles that we live by. And so it's important to understand this, because if we can live through these principles, then we can operate as a reframed practitioner, a reframed professional. And there are a lot of them. I'm not going to read all of them, but a couple of them that I'll point out that we talk about in this last rethink session, which is the pricing without plussing your prices without pushback, is the one we care about. Is we listen to understand why and what is the customer's desired future state. We price our services at a fraction of the value that we provide. We give our customers choices on how they can work with us or not. And probably the one that I care about the most also is using transformational language, number 11, and asking better questions. And so it's important to understand, like, what is it that we want to talk about? Essentially what Hector, we introduced to our reframers and those who attended was the 10 piece of strategic planning for firms to design the ideal practice, which is quite a lot, right? I mean, at a 7th P, which is a plethora of information and content. However, what we really honed in on were these 3 specific ones. How the market sees you, which is your positioning, is one of the aspects of how you can reframe your practice and how to be able to plus your prices without getting pushback. The way you package your services, so how the way that you present your services helps you bundle and present to the client and help them reframe the way that they value your professionalism and the value of your services. And a lot of this comes through language, through conversation, but also just the way you're formatting and you're presenting information to your clients, but also how you're learning what the client values, what results they're looking for, what outcomes they're looking for. Not how many hours can you spend looking at my reports and how many hours is going to take. So getting away from the inputs mindset and more into the outcomes mindset. And lastly is the pricing, is how you charge based on the created value that is uncovered through the conversation, through the questions that you ask. So now that I set that up, Hector, what would you want to add around, some of the main key concepts here? Go ahead and unmute yourself.
The primary concept here is that there are all these P's, and we obviously conveniently changed what the words really are to you match with a P. That way they're easy to remember, alliteration, that sort of thing. But the most important thing is, I believe that accounting professionals, I think all service professionals as a whole, especially the better they get in terms of their craft, right? Like the more experts they become, the more experienced they become, the less they desire to go out and sell themselves. I think a lot of professionals believe that selling themselves cheapens the deal, so to speak. And many times, and I've been through this issue as well, is we have a tough time decoupling someone saying no to the idea of working with us under the terms that we have proposed versus them saying no to us personally. Like we have a tough time decoupling a rejection to the person versus a rejection to the idea. So we see all of pushback, right? So pushback is I think most people would basically say, pushback is rejection. It's the customer saying, no, I don't agree. I don't want to move forward. You're too expensive, or you're not going to help me, or you don't have enough experience, whatever. Any sort of rejection or objection or pushback is something that we tend to see as a personal attack on us personally, a personal attack on our experience, a personal attack in our ideals. And the reality of pushback is a disagreement of value of ideas, right? So like you presented an idea and you said, I think that this idea, which is a projection of the future, this is the stuff that I'm promising I'm going to do. Because when you offer a service, when you offer a subscription access to your firm, whatever it happens to be, you're not selling them a thing. Like it's not in a box. Like people can't try it before they buy it. People don't get to taste it. It's a concept. It's an intangible concept. So you're presenting, hey, here's an idea of an ideal future for us to work together and help you solve your problems. And in that idea, it includes you parting ways with some of your money. This is the idea I'm proposing together. So this is the idea. All right, we're going to do this, and we're going to make this improvements in your life and your business, and you're going to take some of your money and you're going to transfer it our way. And then when people give you pushback or objections, they're just saying, I don't like the idea. So that's the first thing, that we kind of have to be able to be a little bit more stoic in that area where we stop thinking that the customer is doing things for reasons beyond reasons that are their own that we can't comprehend, and they have nothing to do with who you are as a human being and how much you're worth as a human being. So we tend to either one, avoid having the tough conversation about pricing. A lot of folks just kind of like slip the price in there, or they end the Zoom call or the presentation early and say, I'm going to email you the price, because they don't want to be there when the customer says no. And then what happens is, in the absence of value, right, where you're just saying, hey, here's the idea and here's the price, and you send it via email, and you were not there to see the reaction, to defend yourself if they're unsure, then you're going to get a very cold yes or no. So we kind of just send it and just kind of hope for the best. And then when they come back and say no, and in many ways, they weren't even able to react or give you body language or tell you. In the email, people would never say, hey, I value you as a human being, however, I don't want to pay this price. Like, they never include that part. We only get the rejection. So we end up shriveling down and getting scared of it. So over time, we become more and more and more jaded about the sales presentation. We become more and more jaded about increasing our rates. We become more and more jaded just to talk about money, because we're comfortable talking about our experience and what we know. Instead of talking about value, we end up rambling about how much of an expert we are, how much we know, and then we start talking about we start talking technically about what we do instead of talking specifically about what we can do for them. So the concept that we were teaching in this 2-hour webinar is plus your prices without pushback, because one, we need to reframe increasing your prices, change that term, just change the term from increase your price to plus your price. And we can get into that. And then the second one is do the work before the work, preemptively knowing and understanding that customers will have objections, will have some sort of pushback, and prepare yourself for that moment, right? So we have two things happening at the same time. One is plusing your prices, not increasing your prices. And two, getting prepared for a customer's pushback and knowing how to manage that pushback. Carlos, you want to add anything on that?
Yeah, several things. The first idea is the psychological and emotional energy that goes into a conversation when you have to sell your services. First thing, a lot of folks who are accounting professionals, tax professionals, bookkeeping professionals, just professionals as a whole, feeling like they have to sell their services can initially feel kind of icky. So that's the first thing to overcome, right? Is kind of get over that hurdle, mental hurdle. The second thing is that it's taking it personal, which is what you talked about, Hector. Like a lot of people tend to feel like when they get rejected, they're being rejected. The person is being rejected, right? And as that's happening, like it's not really that. One of the things that one of our mentors, Phil Jones, likes to say is that a lot of people fear two things: either rejection, fear, actually three things, or the fear of rejection. But you're not the one that's being rejected when someone's pushing back. They are not rejecting you, they are rejecting it. And it is the idea, the concept, the service, whatever that potential solution it is you're offering. And I think that's a really major point that I would want to point out. You versus the client or the prospect is you and them versus it being the solution that you together want to get through the conversation and figuring out what is the objective they're trying to overcome. But then the second point is around the work before the work, which is preparing for the objections is going to be the best way for you to also know how to anticipate them and how to address them before they even come up. And then one of my favorite Dr. Seuss rhymes that I created is, if you want to avoid objections, ask more questions. That's it. That's the simplicity of it. You want less pushback, really ask more questions. So those are my ideas on that.
Yeah, what I would add is, there's no magic wand to prevent the pushback or to avoid the pushback or to make the pushback disappear. Okay, there is no magic wand. A lot of people online, all these gurus and stuff, they tend to propose. Okay, so they tend to propose that, there's a magic word that you can say, or a magic answer, or a magic comeback that resets the person and makes the person go, yeah, exactly what you're saying. I'm going to do it 100%. I'm going to suspend all my thoughts and feelings that I had towards this because you said the perfect 7 sequence of words right after I said, no, I'm not interested. And somehow the tide will turn. I think that instead of seeing it in that perspective, like, is there a magic answer? Is there a magic process? Is there a magic sequence of words that we can say to get people to turn the pushback into a yes or to a buy? Instead of thinking that if there's something like that, the best way to think is pushback is an invitation to have a deeper conversation about the value. Pushback is an invitation for you to practice and understand that maybe you didn't ask the right question to figure out what is it that they wanted in the first place. Pushback is the customer giving you reps, giving you practice into repeat what you said again in a different way so it makes sense for the customer. Now, it's possible, and we have a live comment here that says, I got a bunch of clients that have cash flow problems, and how am I going to increase my rates when they have cash flow problems? So let's think through that specific scenario. And let's say we're going to sell a tax return, or we're going to sell a bookkeeping service, or quarterly reviewed financial statements, or whatever. If your customer's single most important thing is cash flow, and you're selling them a bookkeeping engagement, then you're selling them the wrong thing. Like what we should be selling them is a solution to fix their cash flow, which happens to be a financial statement, which happens to be bookkeeping, which happens to be tax. So if we know up front that our clients' objection, so to speak, is going to be, hey, I can't pay your rates anymore because of a cash flow problem, then why are you selling the wrong service, right? Now, is it possible that you can fix every one of clients' problems? Like some people's cash flow problems could be that they have really horrible marketing and they have no new customers coming in. Or somebody's cash flow problem could be that their employees are stealing from them. Okay, maybe you're not a police officer or an FBI agent, right? So maybe you can't solve that. Some clients' cash flow problems could be that they don't have skilled workers anymore. The top people left, and they're breaking things when they're doing their work or whatever, and you're having to go back and pay for all that. Or some of the clients' cash flow problems could be that they made some serious mistakes in the past and they're paying, lawsuits or whatever. So long story short, we actually don't know why somebody's having cash flow problems in the first place. And we also kind of don't know if we can solve that problem. However, if we're so focused on doing the one thing that we know how to do, because we've done it for the last 20 years, because when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail type of thing, and then we only focus on selling that service, maybe what we should do is let's take a step back and go, okay, you know what, Mr. Customer, in my experience, having cash flow problems is just about one of the worst things that a business owner can go through. So first, empathize with the problem. So it's one of the worst things that business can go through. I think of cash flow like blood for a body, right? So if you're leaking blood, at some point your body will stop function, right? So I 100% I understand that. Let's spend 10 to 15 minutes, if you don't mind. Maybe we can dig a little deeper and figure out what the root cause of that cash flow problem is. And then let's also figure out if I have a service that can help you solve that. Because if you're telling me cash flow problem is your biggest thing, and most important thing, then I think what I can provide most value is to try to fix that. And then after we fix that, we'll take a look at the services again and see if we can expand to this ideal future where you have perfect books in real time and a tax return and tax planning and all that stuff. But the big challenge is that we're focused so much on the service that we're selling, and we're trying to push that service, and we're not being evil about it. We know that people need a tax return. We know that people need bookkeeping. We don't have an evil agenda to sell them that, but we're not listening to the cues where somebody's telling us that their number one problem is cash flow. So instead of seeing cash flow as the reason why they're rejecting you, see cash flow as the opportunity to change your service offering or reframe your service offering to help them with that.
Yep. Yeah. I want to add a couple things. Our mission is to be the most creative, innovative, and forward-thinking professionals out of all the professions. So when you hear the word problem, this is the reframe I want you to think about. I want you to use the word opportunity. Every problem is an opportunity for us to exercise those three specific traits that we aspire to be in the eyes of the customer. Because, for those of you who are here live, we're going to try to see we can get a little bit of interaction. I want you to type in one word. And that word is, how do you want your clients to describe you in one word? Is it reliable? Is it, just my accountant? Is it something else? Would they be resourceful, knowledgeable, dependable, MVP, a very important person, VIP, whatever you want to call it? If it's not those words, then how can you help change the way they perceive how they describe you? And it should be someone like what you said, Hector, right? Like someone who adds value, words that add value, that just kind of takes care of what's needed, right? And so I think that's the thing, is like, when we look at the problem, for those of you who do have challenges, it's a couple of things. One is, where can we uncover the opportunity behind it? To your point, Hector, could we create different service offerings that might solve that problem? Could we ask different questions to try to navigate alternatives of how to navigate the problem? Or is it a problem of the client? Is the client just not a fit, right? Is it a target market client? Because I know one of the 3Ps, Hector, is positioning, which means that we need to also be clear on who do we help and what problem do we solve. So we try to be an everything for everyone, or we try to be the savior for every small business client, which again is a very noble and beautiful and generous cause, but you're not a nonprofit organization, unfortunately. It's going to drive you crazy. You're really transferring and absorbing the client's pain into your own personal life. And that's what tends to happen with a lot of accounting professionals. They end up being stressed and anxious because they're absorbing a lot of the client's drama.
Yeah. And what I want to add is, every time we do something live or a Zoom or in person, and we ask things like what Carlos asked is, hey, what is one word that you want your customers to describe you as? And when they're referring you to a friend and they say, hey, you got to work with Hector as a great accountant, and they ask, why are they so great? The next word that comes out of their mouth, right, is this one word that we're asking. And it's incredible how we almost always get the same answers. The same answers are trustworthy, honest, knowledgeable, confidential. Now, what's interesting about this is that all these words describe you. And we're asking you, how do you want people to describe you? But the words that you're picking, and this is why we have such a huge opportunity to rebrand, are words that are focused on you. You have to think of the word that's focused on them, right? If someone describes you as helpful, it's about them. You were helping them. If someone describes you as resourceful, you gave them resources. If somebody describes you as a problem solver, you solved their problems. We tend to think that the virtue, because these are virtues of being trustworthy and honest and transparent and knowledgeable and experienced. All these words are accountant focused. They're not customer focused. So yes, while people want their professional service provider to have all these traits, none of these traits are focused back on the customer. So I present to you the opportunity that next time you think about what is the word that you want customers to think about you, think of a word that reflects upon the value you create for them. You being knowledgeable for the sake of being knowledgeable does not create value for them. You being trustworthy does not create value for them. You being honest doesn't create value for them. They're good traits to have because people want to trust their professional. So if you're highly confidential, if you're highly knowledgeable, they want to trust that you come from a place of confidentiality and knowledge and experience. They want to trust that you're capable. Your capabilities are extremely important. But we have to start focusing back on what they can do for us. Because when they think of you, of what you can do for me, and you make that switch in your head that is your role, if they give you pushback on a price, they're not giving you pushback on your knowledge. They're not giving you pushback on your trust. They're not giving you pushback on your knowledge. They're giving you pushback on the value you're creating for them, right? And then all of a sudden, it's no longer about you, it's about your idea about what you're supposed to do for them. And the easy thing is that it's much easier to change what you can do for someone than to change you. And we know that. We consciously know that. The pushback is not an attack on you, your knowledge, your trustworthiness, all that stuff. And the pushback is about the idea. You can detach yourself from the deal and allows you to quickly pivot and change. And you go, you know what? Maybe I didn't understand fully what your issue was. Let's go back to the drawing board and let's take a look at a different option or different ways of working together. So if you do that over and over and over, you get to the point where you almost always go to every single customer waiting for that pushback so it can create an avenue to have that discussion. Peter Block said on the main stage of a little clip that I saw that they said that the best word to start a meaningful conversation is no. And the example that he gave is you have two young people, 20-something-year-old that love each other, and the husband or the boyfriend comes and says, "Would you marry me?" And then the girlfriend says yes. And that feels like an incredible moment. Yet 50% of marriages end in divorce. Right? So yeah, so it's an incredible moment with 50-50 chance of surviving. Instead, he proposes, what if that person would say no? And then the boyfriend will be devastated, but say why? And says, we got some things to discuss. What does our future look like together? Where are we going to live? Are we going to have children? Are we going to raise them with our religion? You know, what are your values? What do you believe in? You know, how do you think our families are going to interact together? Like you start with no, and it just opens up a conversation. So imagine 6 months later, after having a deep conversation rooted from that no, that new marriage proposal, how much stronger it's going to be. And also, was it the right decision to make in the first place? So I believe that the more customers that tell you no, and the less that you take it personal, the more opportunity you are to get better at your craft of offering the service. Comments on that, Carlos?
I just think about two words as you say that. It's like purposeful friction, right? Like try to be intentional about like creating some friction that is intentional towards, getting to a place of equal perspective. Because what tends to happen a lot is a lot of folks will look at things from a specific perspective, and then we'll look at it from another perspective. And if we can't understand the client's perspective of how they perceive value, how they perceive you as someone who's done it before, done it for someone like them, or done it recently, or is equipped to solve their very specific type of problem. Like if you're not able to articulate that, then their perspective of you as an expert is, are you worth it? Can I trust you? What if I spend this money and I don't get the ROI that I need? So that no is typically because you haven't answered all these questions. You haven't given me enough value to know if I could trust you. You haven't given me enough value to know if you are actually equipped to solve this complex problem. You haven't given me enough, value to understand if there's actually evidence that you've done it before. And so usually the no is not rejecting you, is that there are questions unanswered that there weren't 100% on. So being able to address those things early through the power of questions is what helps you get to the higher, probability of getting the client to feel comfortable to say yes towards wanting to work with you and hiring your profession. One quick thing that came out of this exercise for the word exercise sector that I feel kind of as a good suggestion to give folks who are here, because a lot of people type the word when I ask them, is consider this, if you haven't done it before, is when you ask for a review for a client after you've taken care of them, and typically you want to do this after they say, thank you so much, Hector, you're a lifesaver, man. I searched for every accountant to try to solve this specific problem. You were the only one who was able to do it, and you did this in less than 45 minutes. You saved me. Like when they're going off on like you're like complimenting why you're amazing, that's the moment to ask for that favor. Say, hey, could I ask you a favor? Would you be open-minded to leaving me a review? If so, give them very specific instructions, but do this exact experiment. Number one is, if you don't mind, answer these three questions. What was the initial problem that you had? And what is it that I did to help you solve it? And then what would be one word that you would use to describe, how it was working with me. And that is a great discovery for you to know what your clients are using as the word, right? Because some people might say efficient, people say expert, people say something that you might have not even thought of, that that you're thinking of initially. And so try to understand what's the difference between your word and their word, and what can you learn about that. That's an interesting experiment.
Right. And then once you've done this enough times and you have enough words, you can look at your website, maybe even tell ChatGPT, look at my website and audit how often are these words being used in my website. And then ChatGPT will come back and tell you, look, it looks like you haven't done them at all, or you have similar words, or here's an opportunity for you to reword. So if your marketing doesn't speak to the reality, right? Because like you may have a reality in your mind and how you want to market yourself. We are the premier leaders in the accounting space for construction companies that are looking to grow profits, platitude A, platitude B, right? Whereas when it comes to the actual work that you do and the words that are in your review, they're saying different things. They're saying things like, this person is really committed to helping us out. This person is always available when they're needed. This person is very resourceful and creative and helped us solve problems that we didn't even know we had. When you actually you hear what people are saying about you versus what you're putting on your website, wouldn't it make more sense to actually grab the words of what people are saying, put that on your website, so that when people read your website and then go back and read the review, they get this subconscious confirmation going, holy crap, this person's perfect. Because it works the same way in Amazon. So think about this. Like you're looking at a product in Amazon, right? And you have in your mind an idea of what the product's supposed to do, right? So we have a Wi-Fi toaster or whatever, right? So in your mind, the value of a Wi-Fi toaster is that while you're like in a Zoom call in the middle of it, your computer gets a little alert saying that the food is done so it doesn't burn. Right? So that's in your mind what the product's supposed to do. But in the product description, it doesn't say anything like that. It just says Wi-Fi toaster. So Amazon is selling the product, just like we generally are just selling the bookkeeping service or the accounting or whatever, right? If I'm reading the description and I didn't find the solution that I had painted in my mind, right? However, I go back into the reviews and read somebody say it was perfect in the middle of a call, it alerted me and it didn't burn the food, and people immediately connect and go, this is exactly what I was looking for. So essentially what you want is for people to search you online, read on the website what you do for them, and then read the review, and that confirmation immediately lets them go, this person's perfect. So then when you go offer your service and you state your price, the pushback could be on whether or not they can afford it, but the pushback is not on whether or not you can create the value in exchange, right? And that's essentially what we ultimately want, I think, in my opinion, is for customers to say, wow, I can't afford them, but someday I'll be able to afford them. So instead of rejecting you, seeing you as a person they can grow into working with. And then if there's an opportunity between now and that moment, then you figure out how to close that gap, by negotiating and changing your scope or figuring out what you can remove from the services to get there or phase out the job or whatever it is. But essentially, the job of our branding should be for the customers to really, truly say, I wish I could work with that person someday.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. And wanted to ask, would it be a good time now to transition into thinking about this philosophy about extreme ownership, or do you have any other final insights to talk about the concept of pushback?
Yeah, let's go ahead and switch to the next topic. I do want to add one thing. One person in the words in the wordplay that they said of what they want, what the words, how they want people to describe them, they said the word dedicated. Dedicated is a great word, but dedicated, again, it's about them, right?
Internal driver.
Right. So I'm thinking instead of dedicated, committed, right? Because committed is about somebody being dedicated for the result. That's commitment. Right? So dedicated means you have the discipline to do what you're supposed to do. Committed means you have the discipline to do what you're supposed to do until it's done. Right? So like sometimes a little change of word like that can make a huge impact.
Yeah. Some words can be in service to self. Other words is in service to others, right? So committed sounds like it's in service to others. Where dedicated can be more of an internal driver. So absolutely. So
okay.
One of the things that you talked about was this philosophy behind handling pushback. Like We nobody likes rejection. I know I don't, but it's kind of interesting too that in our personal lives we deal with rejection all the time and we kind of brush it off. Like Hector, you and I'm constantly asking you to do things. You're constantly asking me to do things, and we're saying no to each other a lot. Probably because we have high levels of trust and the stakes are probably really low. So we can handle rejection because obviously there's a lot of deeper rooted, levels of trust. This can happen with your kids, right? How many times do you tell your kids to do something or ask them if they want to do something and they say no to you 100 times? You can't take that personally. Now, depending on the context of the situation, but for the small practical things, rejections happen all the time. But it's kind of interesting that in our personal lives, we deal with rejection all the time. We brush it off. But when it comes to business with strangers, people we don't know, we take it so personally. So I think this philosophy and this ideology of how do we handle pushback in a way where we're still showing that commitment towards, taking radical responsibility of things that we can control and things that we can influence. If we can't control it, at least we'll try to influence it. And that's where the power of language really comes in, knowing exactly what to say, knowing exactly how to respond in those moments to still maintain that level of class and level of professionalism, despite the fact someone disagreeing on what they think your value is or saying, I don't want to move forward, rather than coming off as pushy or in sometimes you're kind of responding bitter, if you will, right? Because I just spent 45 minutes trying to help you fix your QuickBooks. And then all of a sudden I quoted you a price and then we start coming back kind of bitter because we sort of did the people pleasing thing at the beginning. So setting boundaries is also a big aspect of it, but like knowing how to be stoic at the same time creating ownership. I really loved the way that you combine these two ideas and you sort of create this combination of it. You want to expand on that?
Yeah, so let's just take a step back and just think from a philosophical standpoint, right? So instead of thinking about the tactics, okay, you should do this or you should do that. Let's just go backwards for a second. Like if I were to think back to the school of thought that helped me decide how I would react to one situation or the other, whether it's to a rejection of a price increase or a pushback or whatever. I think of like what are the roots of my thinking, like from a philosophical standpoint, where do I stand? Because I think that if we actually have a philosophical principle behind it, then when new situations happen in which we didn't prepare for, so to speak, we do have sort of a baseline that we go, well, I do have my baseline, my programming, my principles, and then based on my principles, I know how to act. So I think of Stoicism as one of them, which in a nutshell kind of says that there's a lot of things in the world that happen. Some you can control and some you can't control. And you should focus on the ones you can't control and kind of forget about the ones you can't control because people do things for their reasons and not yours. And you should not dwell so much on why somebody said yes to this or why somebody said no to this or why somebody reacted like this, right? So what happens, happens, and there's not much you can do, and you should stay calm and collected and in control. Okay, so that's kind of like the Stoic school of thought. And I've researched the last couple of years. It's like, is there like an opposite? Like, is there like if somebody were to come back and argue with me and say, Hector, no, not Stoicism. You should look at X, and then there is something that's the opposite of Stoicism, and they really doesn't seem to be one. I mean, you could be like the opposite of Stoicism is worry about everything, right? Yeah, that could be one. Yeah, and I remember Carlos, our grandfather always told us in Spanish, no te preocupes, ocúpate, which means in English it means don't worry, execute. Don't worry, execute. It means like in times of high anxiety and worry, instead of thinking and dwelling about the things that could go wrong, focus on you are the executive. Your persona is the executive. You have to make a decision, and the decision that you make will allow you to worry less because you're gonna move towards the solution or move towards moving away from whatever that problem is, right? So I'm searching what does that look like? What is that called? And I came up with this term, or it didn't come up. I found this term called extreme ownership. And extreme ownership is in many ways sort of the polar opposite of Stoicism. Extreme ownership kind of means that think of every single moment as your fault, right? So everything that happens around you is your fault. Like take ownership over every single moment. Now, I'm not saying go do this because it's going to drive you absolutely bonkers to do this. And some of us, by the way, do that quite a bit. And some of us are the opposite. Some of us immediately blame and deflect someone else. But what I mean by thinking of this moment as your fault, or let's reframe that as your responsibility, or your opportunity to make better, or your opportunity to lead into the solution, or your opportunity to deflect anxiety and be the person that brings Zen into a moment, into a problematic moment. That's the good part of extreme ownership. It's think to yourself, what if I could have done something different that would have changed the outcome? What if I could have said something different that could have changed the outcome? Now, I'm not saying to dwell on regret because you said the wrong thing or dwell on the fact that you could have done something different to fix it. All I'm saying is if another opportunity that seems to look just like this presents itself, what would a more mature, learned, and experienced version of myself that would have taken extreme ownership over the situation could have done to influence the moment, the situation, or the person into a better decision or a better outcome? So that's kind of the opposite. So we have Stoicism and we have extreme ownership. So now that I found it, I found the labels for them, right? And I'm able to put them in a spectrum. Now the big question is, do we pick one versus the other? Do we pick a balance between the two? Or can both situations teach us something that we can bring up to a moment depending on the situation? So the way I see it is, let's think about the things that we can control. We can control how we dress. We can control how early we show up to a meeting. We can control whether we shave or not. We can control how often we pause, what we say, what we don't say, how often we smile. We can control, in a way, how we market ourselves prior to talking to a client. We can control how often we tell the client, you're right versus you're wrong, right? We can control how the energy that we bring to the moment. We can't control what's inside the customer's mind. We can't control the mood they're feeling in. We can't control any prejudice that they could have because of what you look like, or how you're dressed, or your race, or your accent, or your age, or the assumptions they make about your experience based on your age or what you look like. You cannot control those things. So the part where we bring our inner stoicism is, there's a lot of things I can't control. I won't focus on those. But the things I can control, I'm going to bring in extreme ownership and be the best, or bring the best version of that forward. Prepare, learn, study, practice, all the things that you do prior. So when you show up, you provide the maximum version of that. So you take extreme ownership over every single thing you can't control, and you immediately let go of the things you cannot control, but use up that energy that you let go to then feed back your extreme ownership. So that's kind of where I think the two concepts kind of meld together. What are your thoughts about that?
I think they're amazing. Achieving stoicism is not an easy thing to do. You know, as humans, we're naturally emotional, and especially when we handle some of those high stakes type of scenarios like rejection, or even just like before getting into the conversation, it could be anxious. It's anxiety. Like, you ever get a phone call, Hector, from a certain person, and the first thing in your body is just, you get a little like charge, like electric charge. You're like, all right, this person's going to drain my energy. And that happens sometimes with existing customers, right? And that is the stoic ownership. That's what it was called, right? Stoic ownership concept. It requires some practice and some conditioning. But the first thing you could do is, our bodies go into when we're stressed. If we know that we're going to speak with someone that's going to consume a lot of our energy, that's going to require for us to be a lot more patient, it's going to require for us to bite our tongue, because they know they have a certain personality, or maybe it's not the kind of client, but they just having a bad day, like you said, which is the thing we can't control. It's knowing that if those moments happen, what can we do in those very moments to sort of stay focused on, the big picture, which is how we can respond, what can we control, how we can react, and not letting the ego get in the way. But one thing that I know, two things. So one, the overthinking sometimes also stops us. from being able to take that ownership, because we start speculating a lot of imaginary things based on our fears. What if I raise my prices and then they reject me? What if half of my clients leave me and all of a sudden I won't have income to pay my rent? Like, we start getting into these negative spiral loops, and then that puts our body into a stressful state. So the first thing I would just say is, like, whenever you're feeling in a stressful state or an anxious state, is just take a deep breath. The breathing is so important because it physiologically, it actually helps your body get into a less stressed state, so that then your thinking can be a little bit more clear. Because when our emotions are high, because we're stressed, we're in high stress situations, our logic, where do you think it goes? Down the freaking drain. It doesn't exist.
The opposite.
Doesn't exist. So in order for our logic to kind of be in there, we need to neutralize our physical and mental state. So taking a deep breath. And then the second thing I would just say, if we want to practice more stoic ownership, is embracing the power of curiosity, self-curiosity. Why am I thinking this way? Why am I feeling this way? What is it that I'm feeling? Why does it make me feel upset? So being able to do some of these exercises, Hector, I think will help us get there. But just being able to follow this framework without that work before that, it requires that journey too of self-observing. What is our physiological response to stress? How can we put ourselves back into neutral? Meditative practices like taking a quick deep breath so we can reset our body is a helpful way to do that. So that would just be something that I would add.
Yeah, no, the other thing that I would add is, and it might not work for all of us, but sometimes externalizing what we're feeling is very helpful. So let me explain what I mean.
Venting?
Yeah, venting. So think about this. Let's say you have a client that's very worried, very anxious about a specific situation. But when they call you, they don't say, I'm very worried, I'm very anxious about this situation. What they do is they tell you the situation, and in their tone and the speed and how they speak and their body language, they explain the fact that they're anxious about the situation. So in other words, they make up for the fact that they didn't say it verbally with their emotion. So what ends up happening is when we receive oh my God, my banks are not reconciled, and they're just freaking out about it, but they're not telling you that they're freaking out about it. What they do is they elevate the level of anxiety that comes in your way. So what ends up usually dissipating that is you tell your customer, is this something I can sense this is worrying you? And the customer will go, yeah, it's worrying me a lot. And I can sense this is important to you. Yes, it's very important to me. Okay, tell me what's wrong again. After they externalized the fact that they're worried, that it's important, they're going to say, okay, my banks are not reconciled, or my reconciliation's off. You will notice that once somebody gets in words what they were feeling, and it's already out in words, they no longer need to represent that with body language. It works for us too. We can tell the customer in that moment, you can go, instead of like freaking out about it in the answer or telling them, don't worry about it, it's fine. You can say something like, the way you're telling me, it sounds like it's a huge deal. And I think I should worry about this. And the customer will say, yes, you should worry about this. And I think I should prioritize helping you with this problem. And the customer will say, yes, you're supposed to. Then the customer will calm down, and then you will calm down, because the words are out there, and it no longer needs to be represented in body language and negative energy. So sometimes as simple as externalizing what you're feeling, and it's also part of like Stoicism. It's just saying, you're telling somebody, you're telling me multiple things. Some of these are things we can control. I think we could go back and try to fix the reconciliation issue. Some of the things we can't control, which is, yesterday you wrote the wrong check, to someone because you thought you had a different balance. We're going to have to go back and figure out how we can fix that. What do you think? Right? And then they will immediately come down. It's just incredible. And it's something I've been reading about and listening to folks talk about this, is the minute you externalize that feeling of anxiety, then the words that come next are only the logical and the reasonable things. Right? All that anxiety and unreasonableness is because how we're feeling was bottled up inside. So I think that being stoic and then taking extreme, both things, being stoic and then taking extreme ownership about immediately are the sort of the solution.
And being prepared for
that.
those moments are crucial. And not to make a plug or anything, but one of my favorite exercises that we do in the workshop, right, around knowing exactly what to say in those high stakes moments is being able to say to someone, hey, don't worry. And then you kind of turn and you can stack it with another magic word, which is the good news is, so don't worry. The good news is we've seen this before. And what we can do is we're equipped to be able to navigate circumstances like this. Don't worry. The good news is that you're insured and you have insurance, and we can go through the processes to make sure that you're protected. And don't worry. The good news is that the IRS has resources that we can reach out to so we can create a payment plan to help you figure out what we need to do with your tax situation. And so being able to use language as sort of a crutch to help us articulate what it is, how to recognize those moments and manage the energy of the client. Because sometimes we're talking about self-management too, but it's also we're managing how we respond to the client's energy, because anxiety comes from two sides, not only our anxiety, but also their anxiety. And so being able to respond to that is huge. And that's what I'm excited about with our upcoming workshop here in May in LA and Chicago and New York, that we get to bring those scenarios to life, practice them, and equip our accounting professionals to use all these tools so that they can show up being able to communicate prices that are higher value and retain relationships and manage these highly anxious clients and really retrain them to not see everything as end of the world energy, because that tends to happen. We will enable our clients we allow them to come in with us with end of the world energy because we don't know how to handle it. So then we start getting anxious. Oh my God, now I have to mentally get prepared and psychologically get prepared. And Hector, you've had team members in the past in your prior firm who we love them to death because they're highly, highly committed and dedicated. But because they highly care so much about every client, they would be so anxious about doing anything that goes wrong. But that when that energy would transfer over, we know that we needed to look at ways to help also manage that. So with team members, it's also something that we have to be cognizant of too.
Right. But specific to that, what ends up happening is, and again, when people are worried and they are taking extreme ownership over the situation, right? And they come with you with bad news, most of the times they actually don't start with the bad news. They start with the worst possible outcome of the bad news, right? So if they get audited, they'll call you, and instead of saying, hey, I got an audit letter, which is the fact pattern that you want, what happened? Tell me what happened. But they'll start with, we're screwed. So what ends up happening is, we're going to go to jail. We're screwed. We're going to pay a bunch of money. So people start with the worst possible outcome of the situation that happens. So it's not really an objective thing. They come subjectively thinking about what's the worst possible version of what can happen based on this specific problem. And they're not calling you because they want you to worry and freak out as well. They're calling you because they're looking for someone to literally tell them, don't worry, we've done this before, we'll fix this, right? So what Carlos was saying is there's a specific sequence of magic words from exactly what to say, which we covered at Reframe 2024 in Miami, and we're going to cover in our 23 magic words in our one-day event, is that when you actually use those words, you unlock paths in people's brain to diffuse that energy. And like words by themselves don't change an outcome. Words create new context that creates new thinking. New thinking creates new possibilities. New possibilities changes behaviors. Behaviors change outcomes. But we can't jump straight to a behavior. We can't, when somebody says, I'm freaking out and getting audited, we can't tell them, what you should do is don't worry about this. And period. No, you should say, don't worry because we've done this before. And I have great news. I've done audits like this before. Great news. We are prepared for this. Great news. Our bookkeeping is on point. Great news. All these 7 years that I've been annoying you about receipts, guess what? We met the moment. Sometimes magic words, again, they're not the and all be all, but they can create new ways of thinking, new paths that eventually change how people feel about things, their behaviors. We all know that change of behaviors changes the outcomes.
Yeah, and there's a very real situation here. I don't know if you saw it a few minutes ago where client has been with me for 2 years. We increased their price this year, which is reasonable from her perspective, but they're having cash flow issues and they want to negotiate the new price. We're not in a position to negotiate the price for the service we're providing, and we can't take out any other services either. But I can see where the disconnect is. I know for a fact their issue is a pricing issue of their service. So their own, the business owner is not pricing high enough. It's probably the problem, right? They're not passing on the cost to the client, and a marketing issue. I can't fix those for them, but I know the last thing they should do is cut bookkeeping. If they do that, they will be flying blind. Well, I would challenge that.
Can I add something to that? So the nice thing about being a bookkeeper, being an accountant, being a tax preparer is that you're a business owner yourself, right? So you have gone through the exercise of pricing your services. You've gone through the exercise of marketing your services. You've gone through the exercise of satisfying customers or refunding customers. So you have some experience in this area. We're not marketing professionals. We're not advertising professionals. This person's right. The customer may be having problems that are beyond our expertise, and we should not be claiming to be experts at that. But the one thing that we can do is we can be the other human being, not allowing that customer to feel lonely in that process. So if you could simply say, yeah, it sounds like you do have a marketing problem. Want to talk through it? I'm not a marketing expert, but I would love to hear and see if I've heard from my other marketing clients, of anything. Or let's talk through it. And then maybe we can come up with some creative ways of looking for alternate solutions. Or maybe if I know what the problem is a little bit better, I'll go back to my network of other accounting professionals or other business owners or my BNI group or whatever. And maybe next Sunday I'll ask. And then if they come up with any ideas, I'll share them with you. Would you be open for that? All I'm saying is, you're right. There's things that we don't do. It's not in our core competency. But wouldn't it be awesome to have a service professional that says, I would love to at least help you think through it as a fellow business owner, brother in arms. Mm-hmm. It's us versus it. It is the marketing problem that's disallowing us from bringing our customers, et cetera, et cetera. Like Carlos says, I think it would be a breath of fresh air for people to think of you of someone like that. Carlos, go ahead and finish your thought.
I have a final question because, a lot of things I agree with you, but I do think if we know, because in the statement it says, I know for a fact their issue is a pricing issue of their own service. Like, to your point, could we be there next to them looking at that and helping them go on the journey and saying, could it be possible that if you increase your prices, then all of a sudden this doesn't need to be a challenge, being able to keep me as your trusted professional? I'm not saying I'm going to be your pricing consultant, but could we go on a journey of asking a few questions that could help us see if there's any evidence that raising the prices might not negatively affect your cash flow? If anything, it'll help you have more financial flexibility to operate your business accordingly. Because to your point, Hector, some bookkeepers and accounting professionals are not experts at consulting, how someone should price their services, but they should at least be a little bit courageous enough to say, could it be possible that what you're offering right now is underpriced, and that's going to be affecting your entire future of how you even afford any kind of services. And that's just the way it works. Because if we're being courageous enough to raise our prices, how can we inspire our business clients to also do the same where their value still exceeds the cost? That's my kind of final thought / question. I know that we're over time, but not sure if you want to throw anything on that.
No, just the last call out again, everything you do for yourself to equip yourself to be a better communicator, whether it's giving somebody the answer or giving somebody the hope that the answer is achievable, that's going to help you succeed. Okay, I think that's probably the best way to describe my own success. I carry myself giving people the confidence that I will have the answer or find the answer for them. And that's it. And then that's the type of people that you want around you. That's the type of professionals that you want around you. And in today's age, with ChatGPT and the internet, and a lot of our customers, they know what the answer is. They know where they can get it, but they're so overwhelmed that they don't even check those resources. So my takeaway with that would be, Mr. Client, do you mind if I ask my network of professional fellow business owners that I meet every Sunday? This is whether it happens or not. Okay, it's like don't go back and tell me, well, I don't have a network of professionals. Okay, first of all, you should get one. That's a different issue altogether. But I'm saying, whether you have one or not, do you mind if I check with my network of professionals with their opinion about customers like you with problems like this, with pricing issues, and see if they give me any ideas, books or resources, et cetera, et cetera. And the customer will always say yes. And then all you have to do is a ChatGPT deep research, ask a colleague, go to your Facebook groups, and I guarantee you someone will give you tons of good ideas. And you go back to your client and go, these are the ideas that they propose. It's not even like you proposing them or you insinuating that you have the answer. You can say, these are the ideas that my friends or my research proposed. And then you build a deeper relationship with the customer that way.
Okay, so awesome conversation, Hector. We're going to go ahead and wrap it up here. So everyone, thanks for joining the live. For those who get to watch this in a playback, a couple of things about us, www.reframeaccounting.com if you want to learn more about us. We do a lot of educational events. We're talking about this mission of helping the accounting profession rebrand itself by becoming the most creative, innovative, and forward-thinking professions of them all. And that navigating, the threat of AI and other specific things around pricing and how to elevate our value in the eyes of the customer and how to change our brand in the eyes of the customer. So you want to learn more, go there. We have a few events coming up. Again, as a reminder, May 6th in Los Angeles, where I'm conducting a one-day workshop where I'm going to teach you how to use the right language that's going to help you become more influential and navigate better relationships, high-stakes relationships, whether it's in sales, servicing, and retaining client relationships, and even becoming a better leader for your clients and a better communicator in your personal life. It's an incredible and transformative event. And in Chicago on the 13th of May, we're also doing that event. If you're interested, go to our website. And then lastly, we have our capstone event, which is going to be November 2nd through November 4th in Miami, Florida, specifically Coral Gables. And that's where we get together in real life with 150 amazing accounting professionals and a couple of outside professionals and experts that bring different perspectives on how to help you price with confidence. We're going to just break down everything, how to become an expert at knowing how to present price, how to position price, how to package price, how to articulate your value, how to navigate resistance. You will come out of there as a high value professional and expert. And we're super excited. Thanks everyone for joining. Hector, final comments?
No, that's it. Hope to see you at any of our live events.
All right. Till next time. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.